Now we are joined by Pro Hockey Talk's Joe Yerdon. Joe, Dave Medina, great to have you on the program. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Hey, good to be on, Dave. Thanks for having me.
All right. Well, we mentioned a lot of the series are already underway. Going into the playoffs this year, which of these first-round matchups appeal to you most?
There's a couple that stand out to me as some of the most interesting ones. Philadelphia Buffalo is just loaded with intrigue for me because both teams have been kind of opposite of where they were in the seeding wrapping up the season. You know, Buffalo finished 7th in the East, but they wrapped up the season on a really high note. They finished very strong. Philadelphia finished 2nd in the East, winning their division, and they've been pretty rough to close out the year. They've been kind of erratic, haven't been playing all that well, so it creates that kind of instant dynamic for drama. And the other one for me was Detroit and Phoenix, and given how things have gone tonight, I'm starting to wonder if I made the right call. Because Detroit, they got down early, 1-0, but they really took control of that game through the second period and through the rest of the way. They didn't let that early goal by Kyle Turris let them down. So they've been very good. And it's a long haul. You got to win 4 games to get out of the first round. So I think I think both of those series are going to be the ones that really bring people in.
Yeah, I think with Detroit, it's surprising that they were that dominant without their main guy. I mean, Zetterberg, I believe, is Zetterberg is out, and yet they managed to be that dominant at home with the Octopi and everything going on. I do think that Phoenix will come back, though. I mean, I do recall that, even after an early lead, it just seems like the one team will match punch for punch. It could still go 7 games, so I feel like that's how it's going to go. What was your initial prediction for that Detroit series?
I believe I had Detroit winning that series in 6. I kind of stand by that just because it's, Phoenix, it's tough to keep them, it's tough to rattle that team. They're a very mentally tough team. They play very hard, and Dave Tippett keeps them very much in line. Losing one game's not going to get them down, but tonight was a game that I really felt that Phoenix needed to have with Zetterberg out of the lineup because Detroit does play that much better when he's in there. And given the way Detroit just kind of weathered the storm tonight and just didn't let that first goal get them down, and they just kept going at it and kept putting the pressure on Phoenix all game long. That really makes me worry for how Phoenix is going to be able to hold up through the rest of the series.
It's a good point because even though Brizglogov is really played very well as goaltender this year, to see him simply go down that quickly, especially in the third period, it was kind of disappointing. Do you think he could bounce back though in Game 2?
Absolutely. I mean, it's not set in stone that when Zetterberg's going to play. So I mean, if he's out for Game 2, and his knee, you have to kind of go by how the media reports go as far as his health goes. But if his knee's feeling better and he's okay to go, he'll be in there, and that makes things a little bit tougher on Phoenix. But Phoenix will learn from the mistakes that they made in Game 1, and they'll be back at it and they'll be strong. And they pull off a win, they head back to Phoenix where the place will be packed out. There's going to be a lot of Phoenix fans, there's going to be a lot of Detroit fans there too. Don't get me wrong. But the place is going to be going nuts for the Coyotes. We saw how great it was there last season in the playoffs. So Phoenix just has to get a split here and try to send it back home so that they got a chance to put the pressure on Detroit.
Yeah, no question about that. Pro Hockey Talk's Joe Yerdon, our guest. Going back to the Philadelphia Buffalo series, I wonder one interesting situation with their injuries. We mentioned Pronger. You have the Briere situation. I mean, I wonder just how good they're going to be, how consistently they can play with with players banged up and such. And Philadelphia has often been a pretty good offensive team. Can they do with it? Can they hold up even against a goaltender such as Ryan Miller, who, by the way, hasn't really played a ton with his injuries of late? But I think he'll be back in that series. What do you think? How do you evaluate this series going in?
Well, for me, Pronger's the difference maker for Philadelphia. If he's in there, they play much different. They play a lot tougher. And let's face it, he's just one guy on the blue line, but he's a very intimidating presence. And he changes the way the game's kind of played when he's out on the ice because he'll log 30 minutes a game in the playoffs. I mean, that's just how he does things. And the way, having a guy like that on the ice that has that kind of commanding presence that makes you aware of your surroundings at all times and lays the body, sends the message at all times when he's out there. He's a real game-changing kind of player for Philadelphia. Without him, the guys that they have to rely on, they're still good. Don't get me wrong. They're very good defensemen. Mazzaros is excellent. Matt Carroll plays very well. Braden Coburn's a nice, tough defensive presence out there, and Kimmo Timonen's very good as well. But with Pronger, as Pronger goes, is how the Flyers go, and he helps make Sergei Bobrovsky's job a lot easier in goal when he's out there. So for me, he makes a huge difference whether or not he's out there. They're still a very good team without him, and I just worry about their ability to be able to keep Buffalo off the board. And Ryan Miller's a great goalie. He hasn't been as great as we've seen him in the past this season. So the Flyers are going to be able to get theirs, and Danny Briere's he's a freak of nature, and that he just feeds off the negative energy that Sabres fans throw at him. But for me, it's a very even kind of series, even though it's a 2-7 series in the playoffs.
I felt the same way because, again, just going back to offense, I think that the Sabres also happen to have a pretty good offense themselves, the ninth best this year, average of 2.93 goals a game. And some of the guys that are playing, for example, Vanek and Tyler Ennis, these are guys that can probably score the puck when they are at their best. Funny thing about Briere, though, you mentioned the crowd, and I'm sure that's natural since Briere was one of the stalwarts with the Buffalo Sabres. Sort of a bit of a homecoming here with this series. I can imagine the crowds in both arenas are going to be pretty intense for this one, and I can see why you've selected that as one of your favorite series to watch.
Yeah, no, Philly fans, you can always count on the same kind of intensity out of them. And when the team's up, arguably there's not a crowd that's louder in the NHL than the crowd that goes into the Wells Fargo Center in Philly. In Buffalo, they're very, they love the hell out of that team. They love that team to no end, and they still hold a grudge over the way Danny Briere left Buffalo years ago as a free agent, going to Philadelphia and signing a big contract. After kind of leading. He and Chris Drury kind of led the Sabres to like a mini rally, a few seasons back, where they were able to climb up to the top of the standings and be a very good offensive team. The Sabres have been kind of finding their way through the forest since then, and now Vanek's having a great year, Pominville's having a good year, Ennis is having a great year. Drew Stafford's got 31 goals this season. The whole offense there is very sneaky good, and for me it's a bummer that Derek Roy isn't healthy for Buffalo, because that to me is an offense that could be a lot of fun. And for Ryan Miller, having the kind of down year that he's having that kind of offense in front of him helps out a lot. But it would be even scarier to think if Miller's able to find his stride and look like the Vezina winner from last year with that kind of offense in front of him. Buffalo is a scary team.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like they could even be a dark horse this year in the NHL. Getting through this series would be a big step in that direction. Now, how had you actually predicted the series to go? Did you feel that that Philly might end up winning this thing anyway, or were you looking for the upset?
I was leaning towards the upset. I think Buffalo could win this series I'm probably wrong, but I think I may have picked Buffalo to win this in 7. Just because without Pronger, that makes a world of difference. And the Phillies, how good Philly is can't be discounted. But if Pronger plays in the series, depending on when he's able to play, if he's able to play, it's a series that I think Philly can get those 1 or 2 games swung over to them, and they could win it in 6 or 7 as well. But I think I did ultimately go with Buffalo.
Joe Yerdon, our guest from Pro Hockey Talk at prohockeytalk.nbcsports.com. And keeping it in the Eastern Conference, we have another potential series which I thought had some potential as well with the Capitals and Rangers. The game is currently tied at 1. They were going to overtime in that one. This is a series where I feel like defense could be the deciding factor in this game. Ryan Callahan being out, though, I think is a big blow to the Rangers. Is that going to really limit? How much do you think that's going to limit the Rangers' ability to stay in this series? I don't think they're going to win, but I mean, do you think that this is a series that they can at least hang around in and extend to 6 games?
Oh, they can absolutely hang around in the series. I think the way the game's being played tonight is how every game in this series is going to be played. It's going to be tight. It's going to be, the goals are going to be at a premium, despite the offensive talent out there for both teams. It's one where the Rangers missing Callahan, it's a bad loss for them, because he's the kind of guy that, win some of those battles and help put them together, because he's got tremendous chemistry with guys like Brandon Dubinsky and Artem Anisimov. Callahan being missing out of that series certainly hurts the Rangers' ability to pull off an upset. I don't believe they're going to pull off an upset. I liked Washington to win this series in 6. But I think there's a lot of wild card things that could pop up in this series, where, depending on how things go, if Marian Gaborik can find his stride and start filling that changes things drastically for New York. If Alexander Ovechkin and Alex Semin start teeing things up, I know Ovechkin's got the tying goal in this game, but if it's one where those guys can get the freedom on the ice to start making their offense work for them, that changes everything dramatically. And it's one where the lower the score is, the more it helps out the Rangers, because then you're kind of putting it on Henrik Lundqvist to be outstanding, and he's more than capable of doing that.
Oh, no question about it. I mean, we've even seen it in between these two teams a couple of years ago, and that kind of a game is one that the Rangers can more or less control. Speaking of goaltenders, going back to the Capitals, I wonder if they're going to be able to extend themselves in the finals. Now, I understand you predicted them to go to the Stanley Cup Finals this year. Correct me if I'm wrong, but
I did.
I believe you did, and I was wondering whether Michael Neuvirth can actually take them there. Are you confident about them making it on the strength of this goaltender, or do you think he's good enough? Well, or do you think they'll just simply overpower people offensively to get there?
I think it's a difference. It's a couple of different things. I think Washington plays a solid enough defensive game so that they don't need to rely on Neuvirth or Varlamov to win them games. They don't require those guys to make 30, 40 stops every game to keep them in the game. They certainly don't need them to do that. They're able to limit opponents' chances by blocking shots and limiting opportunities to very poor chances from the outside. For Washington, it's a thing where if Washington's able to get their offense going, they can kind of cruise by. If they score 3, 4, 5 goals in a game, they're going to win easily with the way that the kind of defense that they play. They're the kind of team that, kind of similar to Chicago last year, where they don't need the goalie to steal them games. They just need the goalie to be good enough to keep them in the game to be able to win it.
I think that's really well put, especially when you compare with the Blackhawks in a similar situation. So much so that in both cases and for both teams, they're really switching to different goaltenders, and it's probably not going to have that much of impact on the team. It's a good point. Final matchup in the Eastern Conference is one that's off to a really disappointing start. The Tampa Bay Lightning just getting shut out at Pittsburgh 3-0 to begin that series. And to be honest with you, I felt like I felt like the Lightning would have a chance at that series. But I mean, it's early, but I don't know what happened exactly. How did this end up being such a runaway?
Well, I know Pittsburgh broke out late in that game. They scored a couple of goals there in the third, and they were able to kind of lock it in after that. The way Pittsburgh plays defense now is stifling. They're very physical, and they were very physical with Tampa Bay tonight. They were able to kind of rough up Steven Stamkos, and they were kind of able to kind of bump people around. You let Brooks Orpik run around on the ice like that and start tracking guys down, you're going to be in trouble if you're facing off against him. For Tampa Bay, they have to figure out a way to beat Pittsburgh's forecheck and to be able to try to find a way to get in behind their defense to get guys like Stamkos, St. Louis, and LeCavalier, try to get them free. They're going to have to try to battle body for body with Pittsburgh, and Tampa Bay can certainly do that. They have enough guys out there that can body up on the defense. Their forward core, though, is what worries me, because they're really pretty much just like a two-line team. They've had a couple of guys in their third and fourth lines play way above their heads this season. You think of a guy like Adam Hall, who's had a bunch of goals this year, kind of out of the blue after hopping around the NHL. Guys like that, you can't rely on them to always find a way to score a goal to kind of get in the other team's head. So for Tampa Bay, it's going to have to be their superstars that step up and play bigger. Guys like Gagne and St. Louis are going to have to play big games against a Pittsburgh team that is just very smart defensively.
It's going to be a formidable challenge in that case when you think about it. And it's funny that we think of them when we talk about their defense, knowing that for years they'd been known for their scoring tandem of Crosby and Malkin, but they're both not a factor in this series. So definitely their defense making the big stand here. Joe Yerdon, our guest on the program in the city, Locks of the Week Radio. And we now transition to the Western Conference. Let's get these lesser series out of the way. So we'll quickly predict these. Let's start with my Kings, LA Hockey Kings against San Jose. First of all, I'm just going to say it out loud. This is going 5 games. I don't really think there's much you can do without Kopitar. And I know we're both big fans of Kopitar, who's been just a terrific scorer all year. I mean, is there any way that you would disagree with that statement?
No, Kopitar he would at least give the Kings the chance to be able to hang in there with San Jose, and it's a real bad break for the Sharks or for the Kings, drawing San Jose in the first round like that. The Kings really could have used that extra win or overtime loss to kind of get them out of 7th place, to keep them out of 7th or 8th place really. Because facing San Jose or facing Vancouver would have been instant death for them. And of course they draw the Sharks. The Sharks are just playing so well, but not having Kopitar just crushes them. They need Justin Williams to kind of play over his head, and he's got a shoulder that, having had dislocated shoulder problems in my life, I know how easily it can pop out again. It doesn't take a whole lot of jarring for it to get re-injured. So, credit to him for getting back out there after 3 weeks. But if you see him take a big hit from a Doug Murray or anybody really, be very worried about him. But Dustin Brown's gonna have to play way over his head. He's gonna have to really take control of that team. And Jarrett Stoll's gonna have to play above his game. And Ryan Smith is gonna have to just park his butt right in front of Antti Niemi every game and just try to clean up anything that comes from the point. The guy who's most important for LA, though, is Drew Doughty. He's been kind of a letdown this year, in my opinion. He's been kind of a downer this year after being a Norris Trophy candidate last year. They need him to look like the guy who played in the Olympics and contended for an award last year. If they can get him playing on top of his game, they could stand a chance of hanging around a little bit longer against San Jose. But it's tough for me to see how they're able to keep San Jose to 1 or 2 goals a game in the series to be able to stand a chance.
Oh, I agree. Even with Jonathan Quick at net, I mean, I know how great he's been getting great saves throughout the year, but I mean, it's just too much offensive firepower. I mean, when you look at all these great players they've got, I mean, whether it be Heatley or whether it be even that young rising star Couture, I mean, that guy's been great. He's on my fantasy team, so I know this, but he's been terrific all year. So I mean, it's just too much to ask, in my opinion, and so that one probably will be a quick series, but you never know. It's the NHL Stanley Cup Playoffs. I was keeping it on the West Coast with Joe Yerdon of Pro Hockey Talk. Anaheim versus Nashville, similar situation. You have a lot of tremendous scores. Corey Perry, Ryan Getzlaf, Bobby Ryan, Teemu Selanne, you name it, they've got it. They're going up against a pretty good, traditionally defensive team in the Nashville Predators. The Ducks, because of their two big wins against the Kings at the end of the regular season, get the home ice advantage in this series. I think that will play a factor. Your thoughts on this series and how you see it going in terms of your prediction?
This one's going to be rock'em sock'em robots, I think. Anaheim, you look at their roster and nobody really stands out as a big physical type guy. You look at their defense and they've got Francois Beauchemin, who plays as tough as anybody on the blue line. There are other guys, Cam Fowler, Lubomir Visnovsky. We know him very well from the Kings days, but those aren't really physical guys when you look at them. Their third and fourth line players are kind of also rans and nobodies and whatnot. It's all for them. It's all based on their top 2 lines, and luckily for them, one of them is the best, in my opinion, the best line in the NHL with Ryan Getzlaf and Perry. It's got to be tough for them against Nashville because Nashville wants to make the game as boring and physical as possible. They like to body up everybody. They've got a ton of they've got defensemen that'll hurt you with a slap shot as well as a body check. And they've got each line of theirs is like a grind line where they just come out, they play physical, they forecheck like crazy. And then you get guys like Patrick Hornquist who just kind of parks in front of the net, waits for shots to come on goal, and he's able to do what he can. It's a series that I see going all the way to 7 games. And for me, usually in those situations, you look at it like, okay, goaltender versus goaltender, who's got the better goaltender? Well, Nashville certainly does. Pekka Rinne is unbelievable. But for me, though, I think goals are going to be at such a premium in this series that I think Anaheim, with the better goal scorers, are able to just kind of eke this one out. You can flip a coin and be right either way, honestly, with a prediction. But I do kind of like Anaheim. It's the home ice playing into it, and it's just, they've got more offense to their game than Nashville does.
Yeah, I think that's well put, especially with regard to the offense. And I honestly, it's hard to. I'm glad that you brought up the fact that this will be a close series, because sometimes it's what makes it pretty hard to predict. Joe Yerdon, our guest, and that brings us to our final matchup to preview for this first round. One that I am looking forward to myself: Vancouver versus Chicago, a rematch of epic proportions. With Chicago clinching their playoff spot in the final day of the regular season, it's a relief that the Blackhawks are even in the playoffs at all, the Stanley Cup defending champions. Will they have enough?
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Joe.
No. I was totally interrupting you there. Go for it.
Basically, I was going to say, with them having been taken, having a struggle this season, are they going to have the energy to be able to overcome the number one seed? And I think you're going to say no, because you've picked Vancouver to advance to the Stanley Cup final.
Yeah, no, I'm going to say no, and I did pick Vancouver to go to the final. I picked Vancouver to win it all, actually. But for me, I think it's setting up to be one of those series where, Vancouver's gotten their butt kicked by Chicago the last couple of years. Chicago's gotten in their head. They've been able to beat them in Vancouver and beat them soundly, and they've been able to, take Roberto Luongo behind the woodshed and give him a beating 2 years in a row. This Vancouver team this year hasn't shown that psychological weariness that they have in the past, where guys would start chirping them, or guys would take the physical liberties with them and drive them crazy and make them take bad penalties or get down and end up playing like they're skating in mud. I haven't seen that out of Vancouver at all this year. Even in games, the end of the season, they didn't have much to play for the last couple of weeks, and they still came out like it was a mission to go out, beat everybody senseless, and just and do what it takes to win. That's the kind of sign that I needed from them to show that they've got it what it takes to be for real this year. Now, of course, if Chicago is able to find somebody on their bench that can recreate the kind of havoc that Dustin Byfuglien did the last couple of years against Vancouver, that's the kind of test that I think the Canucks need to be able to pass in order to be a champion. But I think this year they're able to give Chicago the kind of spanking that the fans in Vancouver have been itching for the last 2 seasons. And they're able to exercise that last ghost, and then just kind of motor into deeper into the playoffs, and start seeing some other teams that might present some matchup issues for them. But Chicago, don't get me wrong, Chicago still has a ton of talent. They still have Taves, they still have Kane, they still have Sharp, they still have Hossa. Corey Crawford's playing out of his mind. They still have Duncan Keith. They got everybody. But I think with just the way Vancouver is depth-wise and the way that they've just been able to manhandle everybody, regardless of the situation, it's impossible for me to think that Vancouver could lose this series.
I tend to favor the Vancouver in this series as well. How many games do you see it going?
I think I had it going. I think I had it going 6, only because I think Chicago will give Chicago get those puncher's chance kind of games. But nothing to where Vancouver just kind of like sits around and looks at themselves and goes, "Geez, what are we doing here?" I think it goes 6, but it's a kind of 6-game series where they had everything pretty well in hand.
I get a feeling that may end up being the case. After enough times being kicked around, it's about you won. One of these years you figure they would just rise up and simply go gangbusters. That's basically what you've outlined earlier in the conversation. I think this could be a big year for Vancouver. We mentioned dark horses earlier on the program. You highlighted Buffalo as one possible dark horse. Do you see a possible dark horse in the Western Conference?
Not particularly, really. It's tough to say that Detroit's a dark horse given that they won their division and they're the 3 seed. But with the way San Jose's playing outstanding. Vancouver's been unbelievable. It's tough to pick Detroit there. I think if Nashville, if there is going to be a dark horse, it's Nashville. If Nashville's able to get out of that first round and then see what they can do in the second round. And if they've got to play, if they got to play Vancouver, or if they got to play San Jose, however it works out, that's the kind of series where I think where Nashville becomes a wild card in that situation, because they haven't made it that far before, and you don't know how they're going to respond to it. You don't know if they're going to kind of like sit back, relax, and be like, well, we got that off our back, or they use it as motivation and just start steamrolling people, and Pekka Rinne gets that momentum behind him and turns into like an all-world stopper in the playoffs. So I think if I was going to go with a dark horse, I think if Nashville is able to get out of the first round, they're a team that could cause some major headaches in the West.
Wow, that could be interesting to watch if they do, in fact, advance. Joe Yerdon, it's been great to have you on. I really appreciate your time, and I hope you enjoy the rest of this first round, including tonight's overtime game in progress at Washington. Thanks again for joining us here on the program.
Appreciate it, Dave. Thanks a lot.